Warning: this podcast contains graphic content. Trigger warnings include descriptions of violence, torture, murder, and rape. Some episodes may include offenses against children. Please listen with caution, as this podcast is not meant for everyone. January 1998 was a time for new beginnings. 23-year-old Sheryl Sheppard was bringing in the new year with her new fiance, Mike Lavoie, after a televised New Year's Eve engagement. A few days later, her mother came home after being out east for the holidays to Sheryl missing, and her new fiance had not reported it to anyone. What began as a typical day quickly spiraled into a search filled with unanswered questions, chilling discoveries, and an aging mother desperate for answers. This is Sheryl's story. So pour yourself a fresh cup of coffee, get cozy, and let's unravel the layers of this baffling case. I'm Shanda, and every week I'll take you through a deep dive into the dark shadows of true crime while we brew and sip on our favorite blends. Today, I made a peanut butter latte, and again, it is raining outside. I'm sitting on my couch, cozy with a blanket, and I hope you are too. This is Missing, Murdered, and Macchiatos. Sheryl Sheppard was born on September 29, 1968, and grew up in Hamilton, Ontario. She was raised by her single mother named Odette Fisher. Her father was employed as a steelworker, but he was abusive and an alcoholic, so Odette left him shortly after Sheryl's younger sister, Sheila, was born. He ended up remarrying and starting another family, and Odette raised the girls by herself. Odette says that Sheryl loved sports like paintball, horseback riding, and baton twirling in the parades. She was also in brownies and Girl Guides with her younger sister, and Sheryl was described as fun, kind, and friendly. She went to Notre Dame Catholic High School, and in grade 10 she dropped out. Later on, Sheryl started working as an exotic dancer or stripper, which you go girl. Her mother didn't quite approve of, but she eventually landed a job at the coffee and donut shop called Tim Hortons. So Sheryl had been married twice before, once to a man named Keith and a second time to a man named Brian. Neither of the marriages lasted very long. Keith was a bouncer at the club that Sheryl danced at, and they ended up getting married spontaneously, but again, he was abusive in the relationship, and he once beat her so badly that he broke her arm. So the marriage only lasted a couple months before they divorced in 1992. Sheryl then took some time for herself. She found out she couldn't have kids because she had cysts on her ovaries, so she fostered a teen named Tammy. Sheryl then married Keith's best friend, Brian, and Brian, Sheryl, and Tammy all lived together for a while, but again, this second marriage wasn't working and they decided to go their separate ways. Sheryl then met a man named Mike Lavoie and was back and forth between Mike and Brian for a few months before her and Brian finally got divorced on May 14th, 1997. Sheryl then found out that her foster daughter Tammy had gotten pregnant by Brian and that they were now seeing each other. This upset Sheryl quite a bit, as he was her father figure for a year or so, and apparently this ended with a fight on the beach between Sheryl, Tammy, and Brian, where Sheryl was pepper sprayed. Sheryl started officially dating Mike when her and Brian's divorce was recently finalized, so she was able to put all of that kind of mess behind her. Sheryl was excited that Mike had 3 daughters, as she loved kids, and while Sheryl and her mother, Odette, shared a 2-bedroom apartment in the Queenston Road apartment building, they were thrilled when Mike moved in with them and was able to start bringing the girls to the apartment on the days that he had them. They formed quite a close relationship where the girls were comfortable enough to snuggle in bed with Odette and started calling her grandma. December 23, 1997, Sheryl and Mike picked up Mike's girls and brought them back to the apartment. They spent Christmas together as a family and returned the girls to their mother on December 26th. Odette was down east visiting family for the holidays, and Sheryl had been off work for the last month while living off welfare, so her and Mike were enjoying the last few nights of relaxing. A few nights later, on the night of December 30th, Sheryl and Mike decided to attend a New Year's Eve party at the Hamilton Convention Center. Odette had been away for work and wouldn't be returning for a few more days. The party was broadcasted on a local network called CHCH, which shows a clip of Mike with a dirty blonde curly mullet, a light-colored sweatshirt, and a long silver cross necklace. In the video, the reporter says that Mike has a very important question to ask a special lady. Mike grabs the shoulder of Sheryl and kind of pulls her into the frame. Sheryl is shown wearing her blonde hair in a ponytail with poofy bangs, a glittery headband tiara, and a black and silver long sleeve shirt. She also has a drink in her left hand. In the video, Mike asks Sheryl to marry him. She appears cheerful and excited. Mike then places the ring on her left hand and they kiss. The reporter finally asks Sheryl, what is your answer? Sheryl laughs and kind of brushes it off, saying yes, and everyone cheers. Sheryl is then later seen standing beside Mike and flashing her ring to the camera, and that's where the clip ends. The next day, on January 1st, 1998, Sheryl calls Odette. She reminds her mother to enjoy herself as she's on holidays and works too much when she is home. She again asks her what time her train will arrive on the 4th so that Sheryl can drive the hour from Hamilton to Toronto to pick up Odette and bring her back home. Sheryl didn't mention anything about the engagement and they ended the call, both getting on with their day. Sheryl was supposed to start working at Tim Hortons again, but she ended up not showing up for her shift for some unknown reason, so her boss at the time called her, letting her know that if she didn't show up for her shift, she was fired. Sunday, January 4th comes around and Odette arrives at Union Station in Toronto. She quickly looks around for Sheryl, but she doesn't see her, so she goes to grab a coffee in the station while she waits, thinking that maybe she got held up in traffic. About 30 minutes passes and she decides to call the house, thinking, well, maybe Sheryl got distracted and forgot, and Mike would answer the phone and confirm that yeah, Sheryl was on her way. But when she called, there was no answer. It rang and went to voicemail. At this point, Odette thinks, okay, maybe she's then having vehicle problems or has to take a detour because of an accident. After about another hour of still no Sheryl, she decides that she'll just find another way home. She had been on the train for 24 hours and was tired and had to be up for work at 4:30 the next morning. When she arrives home, the house was empty and everything appeared normal. She noticed that the answering machine was blinking and as if there were a couple messages left, but Odette's not able to check the messages as Sheryl's usually the one that's home from work earlier, so she has the code and checks the messages and then passes anything on to Odette. So Odette finishes unpacking her suitcase and puts everything away, and while doing so, she notices one of Mike's hockey bags was missing, so she thinks okay, maybe he's out playing hockey. Not long later, Mike shows up at the house, and when he walks into the apartment, he places Sheryl's car keys on the counter. This set had her mail key and her house key on the ring, and so when Odette sees these, she instantly knows they're Sheryl's keys, as Mike has his own set of keys with a van key on them. So Odette asks Mike where Sheryl is, as she didn't come pick her up from the train station like she said she would, and Mike says, he hadn't seen her since Friday, January 2nd, when he dropped her off in the alley of the Concord Hotel, which is a strip club in Niagara Falls, so that she could work. And mind you, this is now Sunday, January 4th, and so Odette thought this was kind of weird as Sheryl hadn't danced in over a year, and although she didn't approve of Sheryl working there, she and Sheryl told each other everything. They didn't have secrets, they were best friends, and Sheryl was an adult. She then asks why he has Sheryl's car keys, and he said that, she just left them on the seat when he dropped her off. Mike then tells Odette about the engagement that happened on live TV on New Year's Eve. Odette was shocked and knew something was wrong right away because Sheryl had told her multiple times that she would not marry Mike until he was able to hold down a full-time job, and it's unlikely anything had changed in this short time that she was out of town, especially since it was a holiday and a weekend when most businesses were closed. Mike was sitting at the kitchen table flipping a card over and over and over again to the point that Odette felt uneasy about his restlessness. So Odette decides that she's going to call 911 to file a missing persons report, as it's very out of character for Sheryl to be a no-show and to be away from their apartment for 36 hours. If she was just trying to stay away from Mike, she would have kicked Mike out of her and her mother's apartment, not let Mike have full access to the apartment that's not even really his. So the person that she speaks with on the phone tells her to wait overnight, and if she still hasn't shown up in the morning, to call back and then they can file a report. Odette gets ready for bed, leaves her bedroom door open slightly, hoping that when Sheryl comes home, she'll come into her room, wake her up, and explain the evening events and how it was all just a miscommunication. While Odette was trying to fall asleep, she could hear what sounded like papers shuffling in the next room. A short while later, she hears Mike leave the apartment. The next morning came and Odette called back down to the police station stating that she had talked to someone the night prior and that her daughter still hadn't come home and that she would like to file a missing persons report. The person on the phone told her that the station that she called was actually closed, but that she could go to a different police station that was close by. When she got there a little while later to file the report, they were missing the proper missing persons forms, which weird, but they informed her that she would actually have to call the Central Division back to speak with the crime unit. She spoke with an officer and explained the events, and he told her to go back to the house, not to touch anything anymore, and that he would send an officer over there immediately to meet her. By the time Odette makes her way back to the apartment, she notices that most of Mike's belongings have been moved out in the short period that she was gone. This included his clothes that were in Sheryl's closet, his other hockey bag, and equipment, which I find it quite weird that your new fiance is missing for 2 days and you never reported it to anybody, but now you're moving your things out as if she's never coming back. I don't know, maybe that's just me. At the time Sheryl went missing, she was described as a 29-year-old Caucasian female, 5'4", 105 pounds, with wavy blonde hair and blue eyes. According to Mike, she was last seen Friday night after he dropped her off in the alley of the Concord Hotel. Her mother hadn't spoken to her since Thursday afternoon, but people that worked across the street at the bingo hall and knew Sheryl said that they saw her with Mike Friday afternoon. Police showed up to the apartment, took Odette's report, and told her to pack a bag as they were going to need the house for the next 10 days. When homicide detectives and the forensic unit go through the home more thoroughly, there are a lot of suspicious findings. To start, a set of bed sheets were missing. The glass was missing out of a picture frame above Sheryl's bed. There was broken glass in a box that was found on the balcony, and the metal curtain rod in the living room appeared to be missing, with the curtains now nailed to the wall. In the hallway, there were multiple small specks on the wall lower to the ground, but police were unable to release to the public if it was blood or not. Police also found Sheryl's glasses and contacts in the house, which Odette said that Sheryl had really poor eyesight and would never leave the apartment voluntarily without one or the other. They also found her wallet and all of its contents, including her driver's license and credit cards, in the pocket of a new jacket that was hanging in the front closet. They were able to listen to the voicemails left, but only mentioned to the public that Mike was one of the messages around 4:30 on the 4th that he claims he made from his parents' house, which he would have supposedly just been with Sheryl or just dropped Sheryl off, so why he called the house to leave her a message, we don't know. Police then sit down with Odette to get the full, more in-depth story, and that was when they learned the real history of Sheryl and Michael's relationship. Odette told police that Sheryl and Mike's relationship had been rocky from the start. Mike had lived with them off and on for the past 2 years as they would break up and get back together. Odette says that Sheryl had told her multiple times that she would never get married to him until he was able to hold down a full-time job. Mike would make promises to get a job and try to schmooze her by cooking for her, running her baths, buying bottles of wine. He would also occasionally take money out of Sheryl's tub of change that she was using to save up for vacation, as well as one time Sheryl had went as far as hiding her wallet under Odette's mattress so Mike wouldn't take any of her cash. She also recalls a time when she came home to Sheryl sitting at the kitchen table crying with a coworker. When Odette asked her what was wrong, she told Odette that the police had just left because Mike had grabbed her by the throat and left scratch marks on her neck and hand. Odette said that she never witnessed any physical violence occur, just the aftermath, and obviously told her to leave him, but we all know by now that it's not that easy for victims of domestic violence. Police then spoke with a friend and neighbor of Sheryl named Gerald. He states that the night she went missing, he didn't hear any disturbances, but the day after, he did see Mike carrying a garbage bag and asked him what he was doing. to which Mike responded that he was taking his things to the laundromat. Gerald reminds him that they have laundry at the apartment, but Mike says he likes to do his all at once, and the machines at the laundromat are bigger. They continue chatting, and Sheryl's name comes up. Mike mentions to him that Sheryl had been so sick she wasn't even able to call her mother, who was in New Brunswick, and let her know. Gerald also tells police that one time in the apartment's underground parking lot, he witnessed Mike grab Sheryl by the throat and yelled, "If you keep fucking around on me, something's going to happen to you." But it was never reported to police at the time that it happened. When police interview her coworkers, more than one of them mentions that Sheryl had said multiple times that if anything were to happen to her, it would be Mike. Most of them were uncomfortable around Mike, stating that he would show up at Tim Hortons during her shift and hang around watching her for hours. He would clear his throat loudly if she was talking to a customer for too long. A friend and coworker of Sheryl said that Sheryl was an incredible person, but she definitely wasn't perfect. One time when they were hanging out, Sheryl parked outside of a house and told her to wait in the vehicle. She was inside of the house for about 30 minutes, then came out with a stack of money. The friend had kind of questioned it, but Sheryl assured her that she didn't want to know what she was doing to get the money and not to worry about her. The friend had suspected that Sheryl was escorting. She knew Sheryl had gotten into a little bit of trouble in the past, as Sheryl was fined once for driving around in her convertible topless, and she had been convicted of theft under $5,000 in July of 1996, but she was only given so many hours of community service. A family member recalls Sheryl saying that Mike was extremely possessive and jealous, and that there was a chance that she could go missing in the future. A few of her friends that talked to Sheryl the day after Mike proposed said that she had planned to call the engagement off, but would make sure that it was in a public place because she was certain that Mike would become violent. Another close family friend says that she never really saw Sheryl after she started dating Mike, and when she did, Mike always had a tight arm around her and was always like inches away at all times. So after police talk to Sheryl's friends and family, they're also able to speak with the maintenance man of the Queenston apartment that Sheryl and her mother and Mike all live in. His name was Art, and he remembers seeing Mike hauling out 2 large garbage bags and kind of found it weird, as well as the apartment has garbage and laundry in it. The police did end up searching the garbage transfer station but found nothing. So upon hearing these stories and the findings at the house, police call Mike at his parents' house the night of January 4th, and they ask him if he can come in for questioning, preferably within the next 30 minutes. He said that yeah, he would be right down, and they end that phone call. He then tells his parents that he's going to head to the police station, and he leaves the house. A few hours later, the night of the 4th turned into the early morning of Tuesday, January 5th. Mike still had not shown up at the police station, and later they find out that he had gone to a casino 2 hours away and used his frequent flyers card. So this showed that he had actually checked out of the casino at 5 a.m. The next day turns into evening, and evening turns into night, and Mike still hadn't brought himself into the station, so they decided they have no choice but to go out and look for him. Mike was known to police as they had been called multiple times for domestic disputes and public mischief over the years. Word spread throughout the station, and an officer mentions that earlier in the day he had noticed Sheryl's vehicle by a storage unit because he had ran its plates. Nowhere mentions why he didn't go see if Sheryl was in it or around the area, or that it was like a suspicious vehicle, but it's possible that he knew Sheryl was missing and her vehicle was left behind, so he didn't even think twice about it. Anyway, with that being said, police knew exactly where to start. When police showed up to the storage unit, they found Mike inside the storage locker with Sheryl's vehicle running. The officers could hear snoring as they opened up the doors, and they knew that Mike was suffocating to death by carbon monoxide. It appeared that Mike had tried to commit suicide, and luckily they had found him in time, and he was transported by ambulance to the Henderson Hospital emergency room. Police then seized the vehicle and obtained a search warrant, but there were no signs of trauma in the vehicle. During Mike's recovery, police reach out to Mike's exes, particularly the mother of his children named Gwen. So Gwen says that during their relationship, Mike had always had a fiery temper and has a long history of violence. One time he had beaten her so badly, he had broke both of her cheekbones and told her that he often fantasizes about killing her. After one of their fights in 1995, Mike had gone to their local gas station and told the worker that he had just killed his wife and kids. The worker, obviously terrified, called 911 and a welfare check was done by police. Gwen and the girls were found alive and safe, and and Gwen kind of just brushed it off. Mike was then charged with public mischief for this incident and had a mandatory psych evaluation, but unfortunately the charges were dropped and he faced 0 consequences for this. Gwen also had a lot to say about Mike and Sheryl, first being that Sheryl was an amazing stepmother to the girls and that the girls loved her. But she remembers on the night of January 2nd, Mike had picked up the girls between 7 and 7:30 p.m. He told Gwen about his proposal on TV and she was thrilled to hear about it and asked where Sheryl was because she wanted to see the ring. He had told Sheryl that, he dropped her off at work, and with that, Mike and the girls left. But instead of bringing the girls to the apartment as usual, he took them to his mother Pat's house and asked if the girls could stay overnight. When Pat asked Mike where Sheryl was, he said that Sheryl was at home sleeping. So on Sunday, January 4th, Mike drops the girls off to Gwen at 6 p.m., which was earlier than normal, but she notices that the girls have all of their toys from the apartment with them, and she didn't really question it, but she noticed it as odd. So after Mike leaves, she asks the girls if their dad told them the good news about the proposal, but 9-year-old Michelle tells her mother that they didn't get to see Sheryl all weekend because she was missing. So again, Gwen just kind of brushes it off and thinks like, okay, she just wasn't there for the weekend. On Monday, Gwen was walking around the neighborhood when Mike pulled up beside her and she decided to get in with him. He appeared upset and he tells her that Sheryl is missing and that he was just at the strip club showing her photo around to see if anyone had recognized her, but nobody had seen her. He then tells Gwen that Sheryl had been fired from Tim Hortons a few days ago, and when they received their welfare check, Sheryl wanted to go play bingo at the hall across the street. They then got into a heated argument about money, where Sheryl said she was going to have to go back to exotic dancing to make money. He then dropped Gwen off at the house and went upstairs to say hi and hug the girls. Gwen hears Michelle ask her dad if they had found Sheryl yet, but she didn't hear his reply. Gwen said he then gives the girls hugs and kisses and she notices he's starting to cry. And so she was quite taken aback by his tears and tells him that he needs to get his shit together and that the last time he had kind of shown signs like this, he was suicidal. So Mike then gives Gwen a hug and hands her $100 for the girls, which he had never done before, so she's like, what is going on? And she tells him, don't pull any fast ones on me tonight, which he then started crying even harder and left the house. This is when he goes to his parents' house for a few nights, the casino, and eventually the storage locker where he does try to commit suicide. When Gwen talks to the girls later in the night, Michelle mentions that her dad told her that he and Sheryl had broken up for good this time. When police were finally able to question him, Mike tells police that the last time he saw Sheryl was on January 2nd when he dropped her off in the back alley of the Concord Hotel so that she could go dance that night, and that she was supposed to catch a ride home with her ex-husband Brian. He then refused a polygraph test and told police that if they had any more questions, they could follow up with his lawyer. So, with Mike being a dead end and pulling the lawyer card, police followed up with the manager of the Concord Hotel who told them that he had worked there for over 20 years and Sheryl had definitely never worked there. He had no idea who she was until police showed up that day. They also spoke with other dancers at that club and nobody had recognized Sheryl. So friends also said that there's no way that the controlling Mike that they knew would 1. Let Sheryl dance at the club, and 2. Be picked up at the end of the night by her ex-husband. He wouldn't even let her work at a coffee shop without him keeping a close eye on her. So, what are the chances she's allowed to go dance half naked? So police reached out to her ex-husband Brian, who quickly came forward, took a polygraph exam, and denied ever picking her up or making plans to pick her up, which ultimately cleared Brian of having anything to do with her disappearance. Police also looked into her ex-husband Keith, but at the time he was married to another woman named Betty, and they had children together. But he was also well known to police because he had been in and out of jail for breaking and entering charges. Police seem to have ruled him out after questioning, and sadly he passed away in jail on June 22nd, 2001, after becoming intoxicated on jailhouse brew and falling over the upper deck railing approximately 50 feet to his death. If he knew anything about the murder, we will never know. The local news aired many interviews and public pleas for information about Sheryl's disappearance, but Mike refused to be involved with any of the interviews, along with any of the outdoor searches and not giving police any more information. information, which you would think if you were innocent and your new fiance had just went missing, you would be doing everything to find her. And so eventually the police publicly announced that they believed that Sheryl had been the victim of foul play and named Mike as the primary suspect. But sadly, there was not enough hard evidence to lay charges, even though things may seem to point that way. CBC aired a podcast called Someone Knows Something, and Mike's own stepbrother Mark says in an interview that, quote, "You don't try to commit suicide 3 days after someone's missing. It's that conviction already. The stress because you did something bad," unquote. Mike's ex-wife Gwen also tells the same reporter that after Sheryl went missing, the girls' demeanor changed drastically. They started having trouble bathing, showering, and being alone, and if things were moved or different around the house, or if Michelle heard a chain jingle, the girls would scream and scream and scream for hours. Gwen had to learn how to put the girls in a special hold so that they wouldn't accidentally hurt themselves. And Michelle would go on to have visions. Her face would suddenly go pale white, and she had frequent night terrors and woke up screaming that she saw Sheryl. To this day, she believes that her body knows what happened to Sheryl, and maybe she had seen something, but her brain won't let her access that information. She's tried counseling in hopes of bringing up those repressed memories, but no success. A lady named Sheila, who was a friend of Mike's at the time, came forward saying that not long after Sheryl went missing, Mike stayed with her and they would frequently have sex. He would stay in her basement and only come up when all but her youngest children were at school. The children didn't even know that he was down there, and so Sheila said that she could feel a bite mark through his shirt, and when he took his shirt off, she could see a deep bite mark on his chest. She said it appeared scabby and purple with like reddish scratch marks all down his back. When she asked him about it, he kind of played it off, saying like Sheryl liked to get rough with him, but it had been a few weeks since Sheryl had been seen, so he was either hooking up with other women secretly, or his last hookup with Sheryl had been so violent that it left marks for weeks. Sheila was too afraid to ask any more questions, and so she never asked him exactly when it was from, nor did she report it to police. In February of 1998, Odette had ran into Mike and asked Mike where Sheryl was, and his answer was, quote, "I obviously can't tell you that," unquote. Then he went into listing things that he had left at the house and wanted back. So he had told her that, "You give me my stuff back and I'll cooperate." He also claimed that the car was his and not Cheryl's, as it was registered in his name at an unknown address in the suburb of Niagara Falls. There is one rumor that has been circling around Hamilton since the beginning of this case, and that is that Mike had killed Sheryl and threw her body into a wood chipper. The last lead to come in for this case was in 2004 when an anonymous letter showed up at the Hamilton police station giving a name of who was involved in her disappearance and exactly what happened. However, police have not revealed who was named or released any more information on the case. When Odette was given access back to her house, she was left with the task of cleaning up the tons of circles drawn on the hallway wall around what appeared to be multiple tiny specks. Again, we don't know if these are blood, or Gwen had mentioned that the girls had been asked if they had ever had a food fight in the house, so I'm not exactly sure what was on the wall. Odette has since moved out of Hamilton to a smaller town, and as Odette ages, she remembers a time when Sheryl had told her that she would always be there to take care of her into her old age. But here she is, missing a daughter and basically alone with no answers. So many questions still remain with this frustrating case. Like, what happened to Mike's second hockey bag? Is it possible that Mike was set off at the thought of his new fiance, soon-to-be wife, going back to dance as an exotic dancer, and that he accidentally killed her in a fit of rage? Or where was her body, and why hasn't it been found yet? If Sheila reported the bite and scratch marks the moment she noticed them, would Odette get to bury her daughter? Ultimately, Mike is innocent until proven guilty, but could somebody be so unlucky? Recent studies of domestic violence have shown that strangulation attempts, no matter how small, are a major indicator that fatal violence may occur in the upcoming domestic violence events. And now we have to remember that choking is when you choke on food. When someone places their hands around your neck and is cutting off your airway, that is strangulation, not choking. Hamilton police continue to investigate Sheryl's disappearance, and there is still a $50,000 reward for any information leading to an arrest and charges laid. Her mother, Odette, deserves to know what happened to her daughter. No matter how small or irrelevant you think the information is, you can contact the Hamilton Police Station, or if you'd like to stay anonymous, call Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-8477. You can even submit tips online at www.crimestoppershamilton.com. If you have any thoughts or insights about Sheryl Sheppard's case, I'd honestly love to hear from you. You can follow me on Instagram at missing.murdered.macchiatos. I know it's a mouthful, so I also have it linked in my show notes, as well as all of the sources that I used to create this episode. You never know who has information that might lead to an arrest in this case, so don't forget to like, follow, and share with your besties so I can continue to make content and spread awareness about these cases. Remember, every cup of coffee can be a moment of conversation and connection. Keep the discussions alive. Join me next week as we dive into another chilling tale, because the truth is often darker than we imagine. Until then, stay curious, stay safe, and keep sipping. Bye for now.